Just want to share a little bit about the Community Cats podcast here. You can find out pretty much everything in the world about community cats at thecommunitycatspodcast.com. We have over 400 episodes of our podcast, so feel free to become a subscriber today. We also hope you'll join our online cat conference community on Facebook, which is a dedicated group specific to folks that have attended some of our 26 online educational opportunities that we have during the course of the year. We've also assisted over 100 groups to help with funding cat spay neuter via our Community Cats Grants program. So feel free to check that information also out on our website at communitycatspodcast.com. Community Cats grants are really oriented towards the small grassroots organizations, and we know that there are a lot of struggles in accessing spay-neuter resources, and we want to really help facilitate those groups being able to get the cats spayed and neutered that, in their community. I'd certainly like to thank Kristen, our technical cat, for helping make these webinars happen. She is the one who is always there making sure that the technology works for us. All right, now on with the presentation here. I would like to introduce Susie Richmond. She is the Executive Director of Neighborhood Cats. She joined the organization after over 20 years running a major New York City shelter and nonprofit veterinary clinic. At Neighborhood Cats, she has led multiple large targeted TNR projects in New York City and Northern New Jersey, managed a program for providing scholarships to veterinarians for training in high volume spay neuter of community cats, and co-authored the Humane Society of the United States online course on TNR. In her spare time, she can often be found trapping feral cats on Maui. And then we have Brian Cordes. He's a co-founder and National Programs Director for Neighborhood Cats, a leading community cat advocacy group with hands-on programs in New York City, New Jersey, and Maui. Currently, he and his wife, Susie, live in Hawaii and can be usually found trapping cats or releasing them after they've been neutered. In between stints with Neighborhood Cats, he served as a grants manager for PetSmart Charities, overseeing over $21 million in TNR and spay-neuter projects. He has produced many of the leading educational materials on trap-neuter return, including award-winning books and videos. He's assisted numerous communities in setting up large-scale TNR programs and is a frequent presenter on community cat issues. Brian has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Cornell University and a JD from the University of California, Berkeley. And Brian, I'd like to welcome you and turn the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Stacy, and thanks everybody for taking time out today to learn more about return to field and targeting. Just want to say at the outset that you don't need to be madly scrambling notes or copying links. Just download the slides. It's one of the handouts are all the slides from today's presentation as well, and they have live links in them. So you can just sit back, watch the presentation, and just make sure you have that handout. Stacy mentioned cat trivia. We'll be doing a little bit of that today. About halfway through, we'll take a brief break, and we'll have a chance. You guys will have a chance to enjoy that. Okay, so as far as the content today, let's get my right slide. First, I want to talk about just make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to terminology. So you'll hear me mention the term a lot, community cat. And what does that mean? Well, basically, it's a free roaming, unowned cat. So sometimes they're referred to as feral cats, and often they are feral, feral being a behavioral description for unsocialized cats. And sometimes they're referred to as strays. And if you want to be technical about that, strays are cats that have been in a home at some point, and maybe they've been lost or abandoned, but they tame very well. They are tame, and they may revert to a feral state and then quickly come back. Sometimes cats don't neatly fall into certain categories, like they have qualities of being owned and characteristics of being unowned, and some are more or less feral. But if they're out there, they're free roaming. They're not owned in a traditional sense that we consider pet cats, then they would qualify as a community cat. And do keep in mind that people often think feral is a black or white thing, but it really is a range of socialization. And community cats can range from very friendly to being extremely unsocialized and feral. So colony is another term that people use differently, and the way that we define a colony at Neighborhood Cats is what you see here, which is a group of community cats who share a common food source and a common territory. And could be one cat, could be 200 cats. It's really not dependent on the number. It's dependent on their sharing a food source and territory. Also, you could have colonies that include roaming pets who go home at night maybe, or come out at night, or whatever it might be, but they can be part of the colony as well. So let's get into what is return to fields, because we're going to talk about return to field first. And then in the second half of the presentation, we'll talk about how do you combine return to field with other forms of trap neuter return in order to have the most efficient community-wide program available. And today's presentation is a little different than what we usually do. We're usually very focused in our webinars on the hands-on, on trapping and colony caretaking, but we want today to take a step back and look at how do you organize a TNR program on a very large scale and get the best results and for the resources that you're able to invest. So this is a quick schematic of what a return to field program looks like. So you've got, starting up on the upper left, you've got a community cat and he's trapped. So in a return to field situation, typically this cat is being trapped by a citizen or somebody who's got a problem with the cat and doesn't want the cat around. So the cat is trapped and brought to the local open admission shelter. And then in the past, the outcome for this cat, if the cat was feral and unadoptable for reasons of temperament, or if the shelter is overcrowded, was overcrowded, and there's simply no space, even if they're adoptable and considered friendly, then the typical result was euthanasia. So what's developed with the return to field program is that the shelter is not the end of the line. Instead of euthanasia, the cat is spayed or neutered, as we go down the chart here. After a sufficient time for recovery, usually 24 hours, kitty is returned right back to where he was trapped. Now he's fixed and ear tipped and rabies vaccinated, and he's released as close as possible to where he was originally located. So that's the return to field. Now, a question that often comes up is, well, how is this different from trap neuter return or TNR? And it's a great question because in general, when you look at the scenario that's in this graphic, cats being trapped, cats being neutered, cats being returned. So how is that not just TNR? And in a very broad sense of the term TNR, you could say that return to field is one form of it. But in the way that the term TNR is usually used, there are some key distinctions, and they have to do with who's doing the trapping, what the intent of the trapper was, and where the cat ends up. So with a trap neuter return project, the people doing the trapping are like the cats, and they're trying to help them by getting them fixed. So you might be talking about the person who feeds the colony of cats, or somebody who's helping that feeder, or somebody who just wants to make sure the cats can't reproduce anymore. So they're not, now when you're doing return to field, as I mentioned before, the person doing the trapping is typically doesn't like the cats, doesn't want them around, isn't trying to help them, is basically trying to get rid of them. So you have very different intent in the trapping. And then with a typical TNR project, the cats, after they're trapped, are going straight to a spay-neuter clinic. With a return to field program, first they're going to an open admission shelter. So the paths that the cats follow are very different. So you have different kinds of trappers, you have different intent, and you have different places where these cats enter the system. And those are the key distinctions between return to field and TNR. And because they're very different, there are different policies and different programs built around them. So let's talk about where return to field came from. And in the history of this, I actually play a very minor role, but I did get to see how it started firsthand. So I was doing back in 2007, 2008, I was working with the Humane Society of the United States and working with them on adopting a pro-TNR policy and stance. And one of the things that happened was HSUS organized this kind of tour, educational conference tour around the country where if you think you're going to hear a lot from me today, I used to talk for 2 days straight to an audience and go over every aspect of trap, neuter, return. And one of the stops along the way was Jacksonville. And part of what I used to talk about in these presentations was how do you get your local animal control, your local open admission shelter, how do you get them involved in TNR? And one of the things I suggested was approach them and ask them if they will notify you when an ear-tipped cat, so community cats when they're fixed are ear-tipped, and that's a straight line cut of about 1 centimeter off the tip of the left ear, and that identifies them as a community cat and as having been fixed. So I suggested ask them to let you know when they have an ear-tipped cat, and if you know where the cat came from, you can just pick the cat up and let them go, or look around that neighborhood if you want to try to identify the feeder. And it's just an easy way. It's a win-win for the shelter. Their live release rate increases, and of course the cat gets to go home alive. So the head of the local high volume spay neuter clinic in Jacksonville is First Coast No More Homeless Pets, and the executive director there met with the local animal control agency and asked him, can you let us know and return ear-tipped cats to us? And at the time, the director of the local shelter was an interim director, and with no background in animal welfare. He was actually an engineer who worked for the county, but they needed somebody to be the director, so he stepped up and did that. And he thought about it, and he came back to Rick, the head of First Coast No More Homeless Pets, a couple of days later, and he said, listen, instead of, I'll not only let you have the ear-tipped cats, I'll give you all the community cats. And you can fix them and return them to your heart's delight. And that's how the very first large-scale return to field program began. And of course, Rick was a little overwhelmed. He thought he'd be dealing with maybe a few dozen cats, not thousands, as it turned out. But he got a grant from Best Friends Animal Society, which saw the promise in this, and took on the challenge and began the program. And when you look at the statistics that came out of this, they're really, really impressive. So this is the first 6-7 years of the program, this chart. And you'll see that the blue is the number of cats that were coming into the county shelter. Red is the number of cats who were euthanized, and the green is the number of cats who were returned to field. So the program began in August of 2008, and you can see there was a little less than 2,000 cats returned to field. You can see correspondingly how euthanasia in 2008 started to drop compared to the year before, 2007. Return to field, peaked in numbers over closer to 5,000 in 2009 in its first full year. And then you start to see very dramatic decreases in the red and in euthanasia. And by the time you get to 2014, you've gone from over 11,000 cats a year being euthanized to a few hundred. So it was that dramatic an impact. You can also see it's a very successful return to field program because the number of cats being returned to field gradually decreased over time, and we'll talk about how you accomplish that, because intake also started dropping. I think as not direct result of return to field, but as a side effect of kind of changing the culture from if you've got a problem with cats, you drop them off and they get killed, to if you got a problem with cats, you get them spay neutered and you put them back. So the success of the Jacksonville program really caught the attention of the animal welfare field, and it began to be adopted in more and more places around the country. So let's talk about the policy behind this. So the euthanasia was the dominant model for how to deal with community cats, especially ferals. And so why did that stop? Why was there this drive to create a new kind of program? And you know, if euthanasia is the dominant approach at your shelter, or had been at others in the past, why should you stop doing that? And here's the reasons. So keep in mind that euthanasia was the dominant model for how to handle community cats at open admission shelters for decades. And over time, these shelters never saw much improvement. Intake didn't go down. Euthanasia rates stayed very high. You might have 80, 90, like in Jacksonville, it was close to 90%. Complaint calls didn't go down because the number of cats in the community didn't go down. So basically, euthanizing was a total failure when you're looking at community cat management on a community level. None of the metrics that you would consider as reflective of how we're doing were showing any success. So meanwhile, euthanizing is not a cost-free solution. There's numerous studies that have shown that workers in shelters that have high euthanasia rates for healthy animals experience far above average rates of psychological distress. And that's reflected in statistics on substance abuse, on suicide rates, on post-traumatic stress syndrome. And it's not hard to figure out why, because people generally don't go into working with animals because they want to see healthy ones dying. They go in because they want to help them. And then they end up in this kind of no-win situation where animals are flooding in, and you've got, maybe you've got 50 cages and they're all full, and there are 50 more cats coming tomorrow, and your adoption rates are low, and what are you supposed to do? So people burn out real quick, and there's high turnover in addition to mental illness. Poor public relations, again, usually not the fault of the shelter. They end up in this kind of no-win situation, but then the public is like, oh, I don't want to go there, because that's where animals die, and you end up with lower adoptions. So having this as a policy wasn't just a failure in terms of cat control. It was really has been a human failure as well. So why doesn't euthanasia work? I think it's really important to understand that. So there's a number of reasons. Pardon me, we need a little cat control here. So there's in most communities, and I think this is reflective of the failure of euthanasia as a policy. after decades, there's still too many cats, and compared to the amount of resources that are available to manage them. So you just don't have it. Even if you wanted to try to trap and euthanize all of them, there just isn't the resources, the manpower, the vehicles, the equipment, the vet techs, whatever it is, to do that. You also have the people out there in the community who take care of these guys, and they love them, and they don't cooperate when they know the end is that their cats, who they're very bonded to, are going to die. If you don't capture all the cats in a colony, then basically you've just left a lot of resources behind for the ones you didn't get, and they're going to reproduce just as much, but more of their kittens are going to survive because of the additional resources. So and it's very hard in when there's a euthanasia policy. Usually the people doing the trapping don't know how many cats are in the colony and don't have the time to investigate that, and can't hang out for hours. And when there's only 2 cats left, they need to move on. Those of you who do TNR trapping know that, well, if you've got a 10 cat colony, it's not that hard to catch the first 7 or 8, but it may take quite a bit of time to get numbers 9 and 10, and animal control does not have that luxury. So you end up with cats left behind, and all the resources that were there before are now just there for them. And that also ties into what is known as the vacuum effect. And that vacuum effect refers to the fact that when you have community cats located, living at a certain location, they're not there by accident. They're there because the environment can support them. So what do they need? They need adequate food, they need enough food, and they need adequate shelter from whatever the environmental conditions are. And if you take cats away, but the food source and the shelter is left unaltered, that's what's called a vacuum. And you've created an opportunity for new cats to repopulate that territory. And that's a big reason why removing cats and euthanizing them doesn't work. And really that's so important that I kind of want to go through it a little step by step, so you walk away from today understanding why it's euthanizing community cats is just a futile policy. So let's take a colony with a fixed food source, like at a grocery store. Okay, so every day this grocery store, and I couldn't find a dumpster, so I had to use a garbage can in this graphic. But every day this grocery store puts out a certain amount of food and trash, and there's enough food in the dumpster to support 10 community cats. So lo and behold, here we are at the grocery store, and we have 10 community cats with the food source. So sometimes people ask, well, what happens when these cats reproduce and there's only enough food for 10? Well, that's when nature takes over, and you'll have cats starting to get sick because they're malnourished. You'll end up with disease. You'll find FIV and FELV in these malnourished colonies. You'll find some of the cats will start migrating outwards, looking for new food sources and new territory. But basically, over time, there'll be little ups and downs in the numbers, but over time, nature will balance it out so that there's only as many cats there as there's food to provide for them. So you end up with, over time, a fairly stable population. It doesn't go up to 100 if you don't do anything. It's capped by what's called the carrying capacity of that location. So let's say that the new owner doesn't want cats around in the lot, so he calls animal control, who's taking a traditional approach, and they come and they trap the cats, and boom, they're all gone. But what's the problem here? And why don't you put it into the questions box? What is wrong with this situation now?
I'm
Let's see if
keeping
you
a
guys.
lookout for you, Brian, here on
Okay.
comments.
Oh,
Food
food.
source left. Yep.
Yep.
Oh, you see
Yep.
it too, Brian. So you're seeing
Yeah,
it.
I can see it too. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. You guys are very good. Yes, the food sources left, right? There's still enough. There aren't 10 cats, but there's enough food for 10 cats. And guess what? This grocery store is not located on an island in the middle of the Pacific, like we are in Hawaii. It's part of a neighborhood, and that neighborhood uh, has different areas, and those areas have their own community cats, right? And if they're not fixed, they're experiencing the kind of population pressure that I just described. There's only enough food for however many of them. When they got more than that number, some of them are going to start looking for new places to go because there's not food. And guess what? There's food for, you know, 10 cats at this empty grocery store now. And sooner or later, a couple of cats from the neighborhood just are going to discover this food source. And it usually happens pretty quickly. In my experience, it can, well, I'll give you an example in a moment. But so you've got Adam and Eve here. They look around, they say, you know, lots of food, no competition, you know, let's stay around here, let's settle down, and guess what? Let's have a family or two, and boom, within 2 or 3 breeding cycles, you're right back up to 10 cats, and the vacuum is filled. So I'll give you a real life example that just happened to us on Maui. There was a hotel that had a very successful trap neuter return program. They started out with somewhere between 200 and 300 cats on the grounds. They have 40 over 40 acres of grounds. And one of the employees there started a TNR program, got all the cats fixed. 8 years later, they're down to 31. All right, so you know, an 80 to 90% reduction in the number of cats. So very successful. Unfortunately, some of the local conservationists decided that 31 was 31 too many because the hotel is on a flight path for an endangered bird, and the bird might land on the ground, and then if there are cats there, the fear was that they would harm them. So they basically forced the hotel to get rid of the cats, and the cats went to a sanctuary, fortunately, which a rare time when it was appropriate. So now all of a sudden they had 0 cats, right? Problem solved? Well, no, right? Because there was a reason that there were 300 cats there 8 years ago. And within 2 months, that's all it took, there were 50 new cats on the grounds. Now all of them unaltered, none of them managed, and you know, they have a major problem on their hands now. Um, they should have just left the TNR colony in place and let it slowly die out. So this is why euthanasia is such an unsuccessful policy, because you only get short-term gains before you have that problem again. And if there are, you know, if you talk to an animal control officer who has some history, who's been doing this for a while and has been involved in these kind of trap and remove efforts, they'll tell you, you know, they get a call 6 months later, a year later, just as many cats at the location. So what are the benefits for return to field programs? So obviously, as you could see in Jacksonville, you have lower euthanasia rates, right? Because you're not putting the cats down, you're releasing them back to where they came from. And let me emphasize one point, which is we're not talking about taking every single cat that comes into an open admission shelter, fixing them and putting them right back. We're talking about cats who you can surmise from their body condition, their overall health, that it's highly likely that they have a food source and they have a feeder, and that they're doing quite well for themselves, thank you, wherever they were taken from. So we're not putting sickly, malnourished, incapacitated cats back. We're talking about healthy, good body score, bright eyes, clean coat, cats who, like I say, you may not be able to identify their specific caretaker, but it's a pretty good bet that they're out there. So these cats are going back outside. Now your shelter has freed up resources that were spent maybe trapping, definitely housing, euthanasia, disposing of the body. These things add up to an awful lot of money if you're talking about high volume. That's all freed up, hopefully maybe for a TNR program or for dog behavior or for whatever it is that you'd rather be spending your money on besides killing cats. You also get a healthier shelter environment from less crowding, so there's less disease among the cat shelter population. Again, not saying this is fair, but this is reality, is that as your euthanasia rate drops and your live release rate goes up, you're going to get more donations, people are going to come to the shelter more and for more adoptions, so public support starts to rise. There's a culture change, and to me this is really super important, and that's we're talking inside and outside the shelter. So inside the shelter, like I said, people don't go into this field because they want to see animals die, and the ones who do stick around in these high euthanasia situations, most of them wish it was otherwise. And then when I've seen this firsthand, when you introduce a return to field program, and all of a sudden the cats they were expecting to never get out alive are being set free, it's a tremendous morale boost. I've literally, in one shelter in Albuquerque, when they first introduced the return to field program, one of the techs who was responsible for a lot of the euthanasia procedures asked if she could come along when the first cats were being released. So of course the answer was yes. And when that cat was let out of the trap and he ran off to, into his territory, she just started crying. And she said she couldn't believe it. She was so happy to see this paradigm change. I'll give you another example. Was in San Antonio, when I was with PetSmart Charities, we partnered with Best Friends to do these large-scale programs that involved return to field. But San Antonio is too big of a city to effectively target, and that's the second half of our presentation today. So we had to cut the city in half and really only do the return to field and the follow-up trapping in half of the zip codes. Well, that ended up striking the animal control officers who worked for the city shelter as somewhat arbitrary, right? So if a cat came in from one zip code, they lived, and if they came in from another zip code, they died. So they got together on their own, the ACOs. They got a small grant. Don't know how they did it, but they found the money, and they paid for the expense of having these cats that came outside of the project area fixed, and then on their own time, they drove the cats back and let them go. So that's the kind of culture change you can see. Outside the shelter, I mentioned this before, you're now teaching people that the way to handle community cats is not to drop them off and wash your hands of it, but get them fixed. That's the solution to community cats. And if that's what you're doing and you're the community leader, generally when you're the largest shelter in town, over the years, people will just naturally start to follow your lead, and you'll see TNR programs growing. Another thing that is often not talked about is that cats that end up in shelters, if any are going to be saved in a high euthanasia shelter, it's going to be the ones that are friendly. But we know from long experience that just about any cat, when they're trapped, freaks out. and can act quite frightened and appear to be feral. And if they don't have some type of identification like a microchip or a collar, they could be euthanized and mistaken as a feral cat, or there may not be enough room anyway, whether they're friendly or not. So lots of people let their cats roam. Lots of these cats don't have any identification. And when you're doing a high euthanasia program, you're probably putting down some percentage of people's pets. With a return to field program, they're just going home and you are avoiding that. So won't everybody freak out? If you're in a community and you decide, okay, we're going to start putting the cats back, number one fear is, oh my God, everybody's going to go crazy, and we're going to get so much heat that this program isn't going to succeed. That's everybody's fear. There's nothing wrong with feeling that, because that's every time a return to field program has started, that has been a number one concern. So, but we don't want to just take these things at face value. We want to kind of, try to look into them and see what the truth is. So will everybody freak out? So this was a national survey that was commissioned by Alley Cat Allies, commissioned by them, but conducted by an independent national polling organization. And these were the questions. This is the question that was posed to people, which is, if you saw a stray cat and you only had two choices, you could leave the cat outside or you could have the cat caught and euthanized, what do you consider to be the most humane option? So the results were these: 81% said leave the cat where it is. Only 14% said have the cat put down. Okay, let's look at another survey similar that was done some years later commissioned by Best Friends Animal Society. This time they introduced a third alternative, which was TNR, have the cat fixed and then returned. So that was choice A. Choice B was the usual euthanasia, and choice C was just leave them alone and don't do anything. And the results there were similar. And you can see that, I think let's see what the total is. You've got 68% that favored trap, neuter, return. When you add that to the just leave them where they are, you've got 76% of the respondents favored a live outcome, and only a quarter thought that euthanasia was a good idea. And then one last study that I want to show you. This was a survey done in 2008 of Ohio adults, so people over the age of 18. There's a lot of great data. If you're into data on free roaming cats, this is a real great study to read. But just pulling out a couple of the data points, 43% of the participants had seen free roaming cats in their neighborhoods on a regular basis, and 26% had fed them at some point during the prior year. So that's 26% of adults feeding free roaming cats at least once during the prior year. So what do you make of this when you take all this data and you look at it together? The conclusion that I reach is that return to field is the policy that's most aligned with the majority of people in this country. Most people favor a live outcome, and they're willing to leave the community cats where they are in the environment. And euthanasia is aligned with the minority who complain about cats and want them removed. And that's what the data shows. Now, that is usually not the experience of an open admission shelter or an animal control agency or the person at town hall who takes these calls. And when you think about it, it's because there's a very natural distortion taking place, and it's that who calls, right? Does the majority who likes the cats around, do they call up the shelter and say, hey, just wanted to thank you for leaving the cats where they are. We really appreciate them being around. I enjoy feeding them. No, of course not. The calls you get are the ones who are complaining, who don't want them there, who say they're a nuisance, who wants them to be gone. So if you're trying to judge how the public's going to react based just on what's incoming to your call center, you're going to be really afraid that if you start doing a return to field program, they're going to show up with torches and pitchforks. In reality, that's not the case. And you're going to actually have more support, not less, when you introduce these programs. So what are some of the other fears? And this is borne out now. That, you remember that first Jacksonville program was in 2008. So now we have 14 years of experience. And yeah, you're gonna have people who are just really unhappy, because the the local shelter was kind of the dumping ground for them. You're going to have pest control agencies that are very unhappy because they were getting paid to trap the cats, and then they make a windfall by dropping them off at your shelter, and then nobody has to, they don't incur any of the costs. Now all of a sudden they're out of business with a return to field program. So you will have unhappy people, but they will be very much the minority, is what most shelters have experienced. So what are some of the other fears? Well, the people who brought the cats in really don't want them there. So when they come back, they're going to harm them. So this is certainly a genuine, a legitimate risk to be concerned with, but there has not been any reports of return to field programs that have experienced a large, widespread increase in animal abuse as a result of these programs. Most people are not going to commit a crime, are not going to resort to violence. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be very careful and screen your people when they come in and they drop cats off. And you may have somebody along the way who you're like, or there may be a history of abuse where you're not going to return the cat. But the vast majority of people may be unhappy about it, but they're not going to become violent. The Jacksonville program, when they first started, they microchipped all the cats that were being returned to field so that they could try to track what was going on out in the community. Would they start seeing a lot of DOAs with microchips from the return to field program? Would they, would animals be abandoned in other places? And they would, so they wanted to track it. But after 6,000 microchips, they stopped doing it because they didn't find anything. They didn't see any change in any of their statistics. So at that point, they felt like, let's not spend any more money on microchips. Okay, another fear is that people will complain to local officials. And the fact is that some of them will. And the way you deal with that is by anticipating it and preparing your local policymakers. Before you launch your program, you should be talking to the council members. You should be talking to the mayor. You're not looking for their approval, but you're looking to let them know, so it's not a surprise when people call and complain, and educate them so they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that will help a lot with cutting back the complaints. Another fear is that cat owners won't get a chance to reclaim their pets because they're going to, in a return to field program, these guys are moving in and out of the shelter as quickly as possible. So the truth is that the national reclaim average for cats who end up in shelters is only around 2%. So it's pretty abysmal. And the chance of a pet cat being reclaimed is very, very low. They actually have a much better chance of returning home if they're dropped off from wherever they were trapped originally, and then they can find their own way home. So this brings us to one of the kind of hot button issues with return to field, and that's going on right now, and that's what about friendly cats? It's become kind of the dominant um, model, not universal yet. That's why we're still doing these webinars. A lot of shelters are fine with returning feral cats. They start to struggle when the cat is friendly. And there are, interestingly, opposition to return to field programs. The main opponents are not conservationists or um, people who favor euthanasia. It's rescue groups, it's animal rescue groups who are opposed to the practice of um, putting cats who are tame or socialized back where they came from. And I think what's happened in the field is it's become for many policymakers, including some of the national groups, this issue of friendly cats has become too black or white an issue. So you have groups that espouse that all cats, all community cats that come in from the outdoors, whether they're friendly or feral, or as long as they're healthy, they should be returned exactly where they came from. And if you don't do that, you're stealing someone's pet, and the cat was doing well, and it doesn't matter what their temperament is. And then you have, in reaction to that, you have mostly rescue groups who are saying that's inhumane, that you're taking these very friendly cats and you're putting them back outside instead of finding them a home, especially if you have space in your shelter. And they say no friendly cats. So it's become, on one side, you've got groups saying all friendly cats should go back. And on the other side, you've got none should go back. The truth lies in the middle, I think. Well, not the truth, but the best policy in our experience is somewhere in the middle. So when you have a friendly cat, there's, instead of having this, putting the program on autopilot, like if they meet these criteria, if they're this age and they're this health, it doesn't matter what their temperament is, you put them back. Each cat in a return to field program should be individually assessed, and you can do that very quickly. It's possible in a high volume program. We've done it, and these are the things you need to think about. Is number one, what is the shelter's capacity for care? Do you have room for a friendly cat? If you don't, and they're healthy, then it's a reasonable choice to put them back where they came from, because otherwise they're going to die. What's their history? We had a cat once who was friendly, but when the person who brought them in was interviewed upon intake, and then actually some of the neighbors in the area called animal control. This cat had been in the area for years. He was the community's cat for sure, and they were angry that somebody had taken him away. So he had a great situation to go back to, and strong community ties. So when you're doing intake, you're asking things like, how long have you seen this cat in the neighborhood? Did he just show up? Have you seen him on and off for the last 2 years? What's his health? What's his behavior patterns? How many are there other cats in the area? Things like that to assess whether this cat already has a home and you don't need to find him a new one. Also, keep in mind, we want to reduce the free roaming population. We don't want to increase it. So, taking a cat off the streets is a good thing, not a bad thing. So, like I said, the best approach, I think, to friendly cats is an individual assessment, taking all the factors that you know into account, and don't go on autopilot. Don't say they all go back or none of them go back. Treat each cat as an individual, which is truly what they are, and you'll more often than not make the right decision. Now, the ins and outs of the kind of the nuts and bolts of a return to field program, we have a guide for you for that. It's published by the Humane Society of the United States, and myself, Susie Richmond, who's on answering the questions today, and Karen Little from Alley Cat Advocates, a TNR group in Louisville, and Danielle Bays from Humane Society of the United States are all co-authors of this. And it's a real nuts and bolts. It's what do you ask when somebody drops off one of these guys? What you should have questionnaires, standard questionnaires and information that you're gathering. How do you house them? How do you track them through the shelter? What's the safest or best way to return these guys? You know, how do you deal with community messaging? All of that is in this handbook. What we saw happening was as return to field programs were taking hold, there was no reference, there was no central reference material, and shelters were having to start from scratch over and over again. So we put this handbook together based on best practices at the time, so that if you're starting a program or you're looking to improve yours, you can refer to this book. Yeah, undoubtedly you will adapt some of these things to your own circumstances, but it gives you a good place to start. Okay, so before we go into our cat trivia break, I want to show you what a little video of some releases in a return to field program that Susie and I have done. So you can see where when you're hands-on involved in this, you really get to immediately experience the positive aspect of this program. So it's just a short little video.
Okay, buddy, you're home. You excited? Here you go. Okay, Kitty, you're home. Gotta go.
So the second half of today, we're going to talk about targeting and how you can take your return to field program and kind of raise it to the next level. So to me, there's two measures of success when you're talking about a return to field program. The first one's really obvious, which is you're lowering euthanasia. So that's almost a guarantee that you're going to accomplish that. The second measure of success is a bit more complicated, and that has to do with, well, where are the cats coming from? And the goal should be not only to reduce the shelter's euthanasia rate, but to reduce the number of cats that are out in the community, the number of cats coming into your shelter, and then the number of cats you need to return to field. So if you recall, I pointed out in this chart of Jacksonville how the number after that first full year, the number of cats being returned to field kept gradually decreasing, and that as well as intake into the shelter. So ideally, you don't want a return to field program that's just always putting out the same number of cats, returning the same number of cats year after year. You want a program where every year there's fewer cats that come in and fewer cats that need to be put back out. And the way you can accomplish that is by augmenting your return to field program what we call a targeted TNR program, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So this graphic is our RTF cat once again, and here he is, and we've fixed him. He's come into somebody trapped him, dropped him off at the shelter. The decision was made to fix him and put him back because he's a very healthy looking fellow. So there he is, right? He's back in his neighborhood. But what are the chances that he's the only cat in this backyard neighborhood? Pretty small, especially since we know that complaint-driven trapping, which either done by animal control officers or more often by citizens, is very inefficient and rarely gets all of the cats or even most of the cats in an area. It's like somebody has a couple of traps, they put them out, whoever comes along is unfortunate enough to get caught, gets sent off to the shelter, but the bulk of the cats in the area remain. So this is really what return to field program usually looks like. So you've got Kitty coming back, now he's fixed, but there's 9 other cats in the neighborhood and they are not. So this is not going to be an effective form of population control, right? Because this one cat you returned cannot, that reproductive capacity that he represents has been removed, but he's still got 9 cats. Remember, we talked about carrying capacity, and there's a limit to how many cats are going to be in an area. And those 9 cats are going to be able to reproduce more than enough to keep the colony at its carrying capacity. So you basically, by doing this return to field of the 1 cat, and that's all you've done, you've saved that cat's life, which is a great thing, and you've improved a lot of things in your shelter, but you've done nothing to reduce the number of cats in the community. And if that's your goal, if that's one of your goals, then the way to do it is not just to return this guy and walk away, but to send in a team and trap the rest of the cats in that area. In other words, this is what is referred to as the red flag approach. So the RTF cat is your red flag. So if he comes in from a neighborhood, he's your sign that there's probably a bunch of other cats in that area. And if you want to stop having cats coming in from that area, you need to go out there and TNR the rest of them. So this would be what we call colony level targeting, where you're trying to get all the cats in the same group that the RTF cat belongs to. You're trying to get them spayed and neutered. So this is the combination of return to field and colony level targeting. And as promised, we're going to go to Farrellville to have another look at this. And this is on a global scale. What if you're only doing return to field, and the red circles are the cats that have been spayed and neutered through the return to field program, this is what it looks like. So you've got, because they come in randomly through the community, you may have a couple of cats or a few cats from one colony, one group, but generally they're scattered throughout the community. And what you can see is that there's no one colony of cats that has a high enough sterilization rate to prevent, to create population decline, to do anything, to make any dent. All these colonies are going to stay at their same carrying capacity, stay at the same numbers, which equals their carrying capacity. So you're saving their lives, but you're not reducing numbers. Now, if we do the colony level targeting, so that wherever we return a cat to field, we send out a trapper to talk to people in the neighborhood, get whatever information they need, and then trap the rest of the cats or most of the rest of the cats in that area. That would be the blue. Then you start to see a very different picture when it comes to population control. So it's not just the RTF cat who's fixed, it's most of the rest of the colony. And now you've made a significant dent in these particular groups being a source of future cats coming into your shelter. So again, let's play it out graphically. So you would return to field, This is the first cat who was impounded, who was dropped off at the shelter and is being returned. And as we talked about before with the grocery store, well, there's still, plenty of cats there who will reproduce and use up the food that's available. So if you're doing RTF, you're not just dropping that cat off, you're going and you're fixing the rest of them. And then gradually over time, you're going to experience some population decline. And you notice these guys are all ear-tipped. Now, the point of this is, so this is colony level targeting, but colony level targeting and return to field is not necessarily the most efficient way to go when you're talking about population control. So this is what it looks like at first. You return to field that one kitty, you've TNR'd the rest of them. We're talking a few years later, you're down to 5 cats. But there's a risk to this situation, and what do people think it is? There's a risk in terms of population control and numbers. More join. And why would that be? Why would more cats be joining? The vacuum effect. Okay, you guys are really good. That's exactly correct, because you've got your 5 cats, but you still have enough food for 10. And remember, this colony is surrounded by other colonies, and now you have a partial vacuum. And sooner or later, some of these other colonies are going to start creeping in, right? Like here, and the cats that are there, you hear about with TNR how one of the advantages is that the colony cats, once they're fixed, they will keep other cats out of the territory. That's only true if there's only enough food for the cats that are in the territory. If there's more than enough food, they don't really have any incentive to keep anybody out. So you end up with backsliding. You probably won't go back all the way if you stay on top of it a little bit, but you will have some more cats coming in because of the population pressure from surrounding colonies. So how would you solve that problem and not backslide? I'll put that out to you guys for the questions. What would you do to not have more cats coming in? Talk to the food source. Well, you can't, let's say you can't reduce the food source because you got a grocery store here. Catch and fix as they come in. Yeah, that could be, that's kind of a band-aid approach. What's a systemic solution to this? Keep trapping, but keep trapping where? The neighborhood, the surrounding. There you go. There you go. Now you've got it. You don't stop there. You TNR all the colonies in that area. You don't just target the store, you target the entire neighborhood. And if you've got all the colonies TNR'd, there are no community cats to migrate into partial vacuums. And those 5 cats will stay 5 cats because the other colonies are not under pressure. They're not looking for new food sources. And this is what we call community level targeting, as opposed to just looking at one colony at a time. And when you combine that with return to field, like we've been talking about, and we go back to Farrellville, this is what that would look like. You would decide, you would RTF the red cats, wherever they came from, they get fixed and they go back. But instead of following up, instead of using the red flag approach, which is to follow up with each colony that an RTF comes back from, you look at your data, you say, what's a real high intake part of our community, and let's spend all our TNR resources there and not do colony level targeting. Let's do community level targeting. So you look at your data, you realize that zip code number 3 is the neighborhood where most of the cats are free roaming cats are located. So you go in and you TNR all the colonies you can, whether they are connected to an RTF cat or not. So you have 2 things going on at the same time. You have RTF cats going back out, but you also have your high intake areas being targeted for spay neuter. So this would be RTF combined with community level targeting. So I want to give you some real life examples of this, so you don't think it's all just kind of theory. Albuquerque is a great example because they kind of went through a number of phases. They launched just a pure return to field program, just the red cats. Cats coming into shelter, they go back out. That was the extent of the program. That started in 2011. Now, the next year in 2012, they added colony level targeting. So every time they sent out a return to field cat, they had a trapper follow up in that particular location. Sometimes they would catch 2 or 3 more cats. Sometimes they would catch 19 or 20. It just depended on what the situation was where the RTF came back from. And this was launched with support from Best Friends as well as PetSmart Charities. Then, in addition, there was a community level targeting program added onto this as well, where 7 zip codes in the Albuquerque metro area were targeted just for intensive TNR, independent of whether return to field cats were going into those areas or not. The colony level targeting and return to field was part of the municipal shelter, the Albuquerque Animal Welfare Department. And the, excuse me just a moment. The community level targeting was done by a large private shelter in the area. And that started in July of 2010. So you had all these things going on. You have return to field, you have follow-up colony level targeting. Simultaneously, you have high intake zip codes being targeted independent of the municipal shelter. So this is what it looks like statistically. So 2010 is your baseline year when there was nothing going on. And you could see intake was close to 10,000, euthanasia was a little over 5,000. So just return to field was introduced in 2011. And you can see how the green is the number of return to field cats, and you can see how euthanasia dropped from 2010 to 2011 by about or a little bit more than the number of return to field cats. You can also see that intake didn't change. It pretty much stayed level. Just euthanasia changed. Then in 2012, the red flag approach, the colony level targeting. So every time they sent a return to field cat out, they followed up with trapping at that location. And you can see the number of return to field cats increased, but euthanasia continued to drop, but you also start to see intake dropping. So you're not just getting euthanasia gains, you're getting intake gains as well. And then as you progress through the next few years, you can see how euthanasia, kept going down to about as low as it's going to go, like 85% by 2016 compared to 2010. But you see the beauty of that intake every year going lower and lower and lower, and that's because of the colony level targeting and the community level targeting that was going on, so that the source of the return to field cats was being addressed at the same time return to field was going on. So there were, and you'll see the green starts to go down, fewer cats coming in, fewer cats needing to be returned. So this is that second level of success that can be achieved when you combine return to field with targeting. This similar program was done in not just Albuquerque, but 5 other communities. Well, it's been done in a number of places, but it was the first, you see the first 6 that were done here. And this is from a study that you can get online from Daniel Spearer and Peter Wolf of Best Friends, where they did a data analysis of the 6 shelters that participated in what we call the community cat program. So that's when you integrate return to field and targeted TNR. And you can see on average in the left column highlighted in yellow, your average intake is down 32%, kittens 40%, and average euthanasia down 83%. So really dramatic drops in euthanasia across the board. You can see in Tucson went down 91%, but pretty significant drops for most, except for San Antonio, which went down 1%. And there was a reason for that. You still see, on average, 1/3 lower cat intake. So not just doing return to field, but combining it with targeting, it can get you lower intake. And in San Antonio, what happened was they, when they launched the return to field program, all of a sudden people started feeling like, oh, the shelter is a safe place for cats now. And that first year of the program, they had a surge in kittens being dropped off. After that first year, if you look at the charts, you'll see that intake kept decreasing. So it was just that kind of first year phenomenon that can happen when there's suppressed demand and people, all of a sudden, their perception of the shelter changes. So how do you identify these high need areas if you're going to do community level targeting? There's a few different ways to do this. One is you can GIS map. If you look at intake, you're gathering the addresses, hopefully, when people bring in cats, where addresses of where they came from, and you can just put them on a map. And through Google or some other program, and get a visual of where the cats are coming from, and that will help you identify where to target. You can also map complaint calls, or if you're not a shelter, you can track requests for assistance. Any data that comes in from a location, you want to get that address and then map it. And then finally, there's what I call tribal knowledge, which is just if you talk to people in the field who are experienced and have been working in that community for some time, they're going to know where there are concentrations of community cats. Another tell is the income level, the economic level of the community, because there's a strong correlation between, Stacy was mentioning this in another area, but between poor, social vulnerability, I believe it's a term, or low income, and the presence of community cats. And there was a really interesting study that you see here done by Dr. Gary Petronic in Boston, in part of Boston, to correlate this. And what you see on the left there is the let's see, this is income level, and the darker the red and orange, the lower the average income in that area, right? And then on the right, what you see is cat intake from that same community, and the dark red is the high intake areas. And you can see how the dark orange on the right-hand chart, which is cat intake, correlates almost exactly to the poorest areas, the lowest income areas on the chart to the left. So that's a good clue if you're looking for where to target and where the most community cats are, is socioeconomic indications. So how to combine kind of the nuts and bolts, that's a little taste of the nuts and bolts, that discussion about income levels and cat intake. PetSmart Charities has published a book that I authored called, as you can see, Community TNR Tactics and Tools. And this goes into return to field and combining it with targeting and how to do targeting in a lot of detail. So if you're looking for the nuts and bolts on that, you can, if you want a print copy, I think they're still selling them on Amazon, but it's one of the handouts today. So go ahead and download that book, and you'll be able to go into the nuts and bolts of this in a lot more detail.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Super, Brian. I have lots of questions, and I've seen quite a few questions out there. So, so this is great that we have time for questions, because I know sometimes during the TNR certification workshops, we're usually pretty tight on time. So let's do a little acronym dance, Brian. So
Okay.
we have return to field, we have TNR, we have TNRM, we have TNVR, and some folks are not 100% clear what the differences are between all of them. You went into pretty good detail about return to field versus TNR, but how do those other acronyms fill in? And just again, to repeat, return to field and TNR, what are the differences between those?
Okay. Well, yeah, TNR is trap, neuter, return. Sometimes referred to as trap, neuter, release, but return is a better term because it indicates the cat's going back to where he or she came from and not just being randomly released. So we prefer trap, neuter, return. Some programs like to emphasize other parts of the program as well. So TNRM, the M stands for manage or monitor, and that implies that part of the program is after the cats have been returned, there's a caretaker who's feeding them, watching over them, basically managing that colony. The TNVR is some organizations like to emphasize the rabies vaccination. So the V is for vaccinate. Personally, I like to just say TNR. And the reason for that is if you try to stick whatever part of it you want to emphasize into the name, you can end up with a very, very long acronym. And back in, so for example, back in about the mid 2000s, it got really silly. It became like TTAVRNM for trap, test, which fortunately we don't do anymore, adopt, rescue, manage, monitor, and it just became totally unwieldy. So, it's trap, neuter, return. It encompasses a number of other things besides just those 3 steps. But basically, if you see TNR and some other letters stuck onto it, it's TNR. Just whatever program likes to emphasize some other part of it. Now, going back to the difference between TNR and return to field, as I say, it's confusing because the return to field program involves trapping a cat, right? It involves getting the cat neutered, and it involves returning the cat. So isn't that TNR? How's that any different, right? Since it's trap, neuter, return. And that's where it's important to understand the differences in the overall intent and approach. So when in a return to field situation, the person who's doing the trapping is not intending to get the cat fixed and have the cat returned. In most cases, that's a citizen who wants the cat gone for good, and they don't much care what happens to the cat after they drop the cat off at the shelter. In a typical TNR situation, the trappers do care what happens to the cat. They want the cat to come back. They just don't want him to reproduce. So the intent with which the trapping occurs is very, very different. Another significant difference is that in a typical TNR project, the cats are going straight to the spay-neuter clinic, and then they're recovered and they're returned. With a return to field situation, the first stop for the cat is usually an open admission shelter. And then the cat goes to a spay-neuter clinic if the shelter decides that the cat's being returned. So that's a big difference. And then that points to yet another difference, which is who's deciding what happens to the cat. In a TNR situation, when Susie and I go out and we help a caretaker do a TNR project, the caretaker's deciding, I want the cat back. In a return to field situation, it's the shelter that decides what happens to the cat, not the person who trapped him or her. So those are kind of the differences. Maybe another way of saying it is that in return to field, if the cat was not spayed and neutered and returned, the cat would be euthanized. in a TNR situation, that doesn't happen. People don't trap the cat for purpose. There's no, the worst that would happen is the cat would never be trapped. So those are the distinctions. I hope that makes it a little clearer.
So the other question that we have had out there in terms of, like, how do you get enough trappers out there to be able to handle trapping all of these cats in the community? And my sort of taking it to the next level question revolves around, we have a lot of folks that do what I call the neighborhood cats model, which is, they're individuals, they're just trying to trap a couple of cats in their backyard, trying to get them spayed and neutered. They're going to take them to a clinic, they're going to bring them back. They really don't touch the sheltering environment at all. And then there is this community cat management program component from within the shelter. Are we working in an environment where this is a combined effort, or in an ideal world, are we working as individuals and the sheltering world's not involved? How do you envision that?
Well, in your most efficient program, and that becomes more and more important these days as the accessibility to affordable spay neuter shrinks. So what we have has to be used the most efficiently if we're going to have the most impact. So a program, a community-wide program where the different parts of the system are coordinating with each other is going to be a lot more effective than a program where all the different players are just operating on their own, and maybe they cross paths in certain ways, but they're not coordinating their efforts. They're not. There's no central plan. So with a community cat program where you're combining return to field with targeting, either on the colony level or you're identifying high need areas in the community, that can be accomplished in a couple of ways in terms of who does the trapping. So these programs, those 6 programs that I showed you the statistics for, they had two employees. One was in charge of the program and one was dedicated to trapping. And that second employee was just going out there and doing TNR. So you can integrate the targeting into the shelters program by hiring that second staff person. Another way I've seen it done is that the shelter partners with local nonprofits who do TNR, and the shelter will handle a lot of the spay neuter, especially for the return to field cats, and then alert the nonprofit, like, hey, we're returning, sometimes the nonprofit will actually do the driving, and then the nonprofit goes and their trappers follow up on that colony or start to work in that high need area. But so if you can combine in that way, you're going to get those overall community benefits. I think that TNR evolved in this country as a very much a grassroots thing with individuals. So people are very much used to just kind of whoever calls me, that's who I help, and operating in their own little circles, which usually quickly become pretty overwhelming in terms of demand. And it's not the norm to coordinate and to work with other, especially larger partners in the community. But that's kind of to our detriment now. And I know in New York City with Neighborhood Cats, we're running a grant program now that's supported by the Community Cats podcast to encourage groups to start targeting, to stop thinking one colony at a time, but start to think a neighborhood at a time. So don't just go into somebody's backyard and fix their 6 cats, do the whole block, and that can grow from there into doing the whole downtown area or doing the whole zip code or things like that. But we don't have to go backwards now because we're losing spay neuter if we become more effective and more efficient in our methods. But that kind of depends on everybody in the community being willing to, first of all, knowing that this is a more efficient and effective way to go, and then being willing to say, to go to the shelter and instead of just taking in random calls and working there, go to the shelter and say, where would you like us to trap? Where are you getting the most cats coming in from? We're going to put our resources into that neighborhood and not just scatter ourselves all over town. It's a tough paradigm shift, but keep plugging away trying to convince people that that it's a better way to go.
So what are your thoughts about microchipping all your TNR kitties for ID purposes? Is there a stronger desire to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more accessible than it used to be because microchips have gotten so much cheaper. It used to be $20 a chip, and now it's, you can get them for just a few dollars. So I think it depends on the conditions. It's a great thing in a system that can support microchips. So everybody's got microchip readers. Everybody knows to scan. The chips are all compatible. There's a central database people can easily refer to. People are encouraged to keep the information on the chip updated. If you've got all that going on, then having microchips can be a huge help. Because sometimes I know at the Maui Humane Society, they chip all the cats. And sometimes a cat that came in from one location is picked up on the other side of the island. And we were able to contact the original caretaker, or just lost pet cats who end up in colonies, or just like that idea of tracking, well, what's happening? Are we worried about abuse? Are we seeing more of it? This is all the more information makes for better, more effective programs. But that coordinated system needs to be in place. So if everybody isn't scanning, if the chips aren't compatible, if there isn't a way to share this information quickly, then it's just a piece of metal in a cat's back that's not doing any good. So
I have a question for the group out there. How many folks in the group are part of the online cat conference community on Facebook? And if you are not aware of it, we'll put the link in the chat out there. If Kristen, if you can do that, because there are quite a few questions of folks asking about how to find other trappers and how to connect with other trappers and that kind of thing. And so feel free to actively use that Facebook group. That's there for you. It's not there for me. I mean, well, it's there for me too, but it's for that's for all of us. And so please utilize that as a way of trying to find others. I know that there are some Facebook groups too out there, and there's groups.io. You've referenced a couple, Brian, from that standpoint. If you're not a Facebook person, where you can connect with other folks who are trappers and try and find trappers in your area to be able to work together. I know there's a group in Long Island where they've come together so that no appointment is left behind, and they will coordinate and collaborate. So if someone's got 6 appointments but they only trap 3 cats, that someone else can take those other 3 slots, and so that they're not gonna stress relations with the veterinarian by not fulfilling the promise of bringing in X amount of cats. Do you have any other tips, Brian, on sort of how to connect with trappers, how to train more trappers, bring in more? You've been doing this for so long in New York City. I mean, how do you get more folks introduced into the concept of trapping?
Well, your idea about Facebook is an excellent one, because there's a strong, usually a strong online community of local trappers in your area. So in New York City, there's a couple of Facebook groups in different parts of Brooklyn. There's one in the Bronx. So it's just a matter of doing a quick search for people on Maui. There's a group that's over 2,000 people that are working with cats. So find that online community and connect with that. If you're an organization, doesn't matter what size you are, develop an email list. You can get onto MailChimp for free, I think, for the first 2,000 names. And what we'll do at Neighborhood Cats is somebody needs help feeding, or somebody needs help fostering, or something like that, and email goes out to this network of a few thousand people, and usually it's solved. So between online communities and nonprofits kind of taking the lead, realizing that, especially as you start to work more and more on a community level, there's more to it than trapping, and networking people and creating those networking opportunities within your community becomes an important part of making your TNR program effective. So look for stuff online if you're working as an individual, so you hook into that network, and if you're a nonprofit, whatever size you are, start to build that network so people have something to join.
Right, right. And also, obviously, well, organizations can partner with us here at the Community Cats Podcast and Neighborhood Cats if you want to help with spreading the word out into your community, trying to encourage others to sign up for the TNR certification workshops. We send along all the digital swag that you would need, along with press releases, to be able to get the word out in your community and area, trying to bring in volunteers to become trappers. Many organizations require that they go through our training first as a way of pre-screening volunteers, so you're not sort of wasting your 3 hours in training somebody and then they go, oh my gosh, my car's gonna have all these cats in them, or I don't have a car, or oh, I didn't know I had to hold them overnight, or so or they bounce around in the trap. I didn't know that was going to happen. I couldn't do that. So there are people who will go through the training and it'll weed them out, and then there are other people who go, oh, that looks so cool, I can't wait to use the drop trap, right? So we're helping with that pre-screening process with volunteers, doing that first step, and then you can personalize it on that next step of getting to know your organization. But we're here to partner to try and help with the basic 101 training of a beginning trapper, and we're happy to partner with your organization and help with sharing. One other resource that I found very helpful too is all the lost and found Facebook groups that are out there utilizing trapper training, and even in these free webinars is just going into those groups and sharing the links to these free webinars that we provide, so that folks in those groups can learn about how to trap cats in the community. Because with lost and found cats, if you've lost a cat, you're going to be setting traps out there, and oftentimes you're going to trap other people's cats too. So you're having to learn how to use this equipment and learning out more about your community in the whole lost and found component. And we do have Kim Freeman out there in our audience today, and she's the lost cat finder, and she's got some great resources there with regards to lost and found cats too.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree with you about like the certification workshop started because there were spay neuter clinics in New York City that were opening up for trappers, and then somebody would reserve 20 spots and they'd show up with 9 cats. And so the clinic started to require that people take the certification workshop, which we were doing in person then and now is online. And they found that the success rate dramatically increased. So they might show up with 17 cats or 18 cats, but not with 9. So that became, you could not book appointments at the clinic unless you could show that you were certified. So that's a big advantage to the online workshop that is offered through us and Community Cats Podcast. It just make sure everybody's on the same page and has a basic knowledge of the work, because well, if you've tried, it's not as easy as just buy a trap, put some bait in the back, and stick it outside. There's quite a bit more to it.
One other thing that I'd like to mention as a resource, and just to remind folks that it exists, and certainly I'm happy to provide this as a resource as long as Brian is okay, and I can also check with Pat Dames, but there was a mention that TNR Texas has a great Facebook page. Well, Pat and Brian did a wonderful presentation at our online cat conference. It was either last year or the year before. It all kind of blurs, but on how to start a TNR program. And I'm happy to make that as public as possible and get that information out there if you are at a point where you are wanting to start an organization, making sure you've got the foundation set the right way to start out, rather than getting in a system where you've got the laundry list of calls that have come in and you're just trying to chop right down that list and go, first come, first serve, rather than trying to think strategically and capturing the information and going, hey, we've got a dozen calls from this one location and then 2 calls from over here. So, and then let's cross-check that with the local shelter to see how many intakes they have, and maybe we're going to see a common trend, and let's then work on that specific area. So, it's great to get things set up sort of right the first time to be most efficient and effective, because one other thing Brian has said in the past too to me is celebrate your successes and really make sure that your first project is a successful project. So don't try to be all things to all people at the beginning. Is get something that's realistic. If you can only do 20 surgeries, don't go after a colony with 100 cats. If you only have the capacity, make sure you're choosing a scenario where you're going to be successful, so that then you can write that story, share that information, and get that level of credibility, so that then you can grow.
Yeah, being strategic when you start to talk about the community level, which is what we've been doing today. Yeah, it's all about planning and having having a game plan. How do I get from where I am now to where I want to be, instead of just kind of randomly handling what comes your way.